What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Vanguard. We have a super special live stream discussion / debate for you all today. Really excited to break it down and get into the weeds with Lance a little bit from the Serfs about one of our favorite topics to discuss, that being First Amendment rights, free speech, and internet censorship and deplatforming as it relates to those subjects. So super excited to get into that. We're going to be welcoming Lance to the stream now any minute, so stay tuned. How you doing, Zach?
Doing good. Excited to talk to Lance. You know, I put on this hat before we went live today because I thought about how you and I used to always wear hats on stream, and now neither of us ever do. And I was like, man, we've gone through so many iterations of just like fashion on the Vanguard. So really, if you guys scroll through some photos, you're going to see a real change in the whatever dress habits of us, which I thought was really interesting and probably nobody cares about but me. Anyway, so yeah, super excited for our chat with Lance today. Obviously, we just recently had a pretty fiery debate with Sam Cedar about censorship. I imagine Lance checked it out because he DM'd us about it and was like, hey, I want to talk to you guys about this too. I was like, great, this will be awesome. So super excited to get that off the ground. I think we've had maybe 2 other chats with Lance in the past, both of them very friendly, very nice. Obviously, we probably disagree on it quite a bit, but I like the guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Lance is a friend of the show, but this is definitely a issue where I think we have some major divergence of perspective on. So I'm excited to hash it out and hopefully change some hearts and minds in the process. If you guys are just tuning into the live stream, make sure to hit that like button. We think this is a super important conversation to have, and make sure to hit that like button so that more people can see it. Again, this conversation is really important. We live in the internet era. The internet and social media is where a lot of communication goes on. It's also where a lot of dissent goes on from voices like Zach and mine. And, I think it's in the best interest, at least for the left, to defend the values of free speech. Again, being the fact that these social media companies and the internet at large is essentially the new public square. So again, really important conversation. Hitting that like button really helps as far as helping us, beat that algorithm. Speaking of censorship, the very censorious algorithm. So yeah, more people can hopefully see this debate, this conversation. Before we get into anything else, did want to quickly shout out the patron community. If you guys enjoy our live streams and perspective and the commentary and content that we create, consider hitting us up on Patreon. The link's in the description. One of the best ways to support the work that Zach and I do is by contributing a few bucks on a monthly basis to our Patreon. It really helps out. We wouldn't be able to do the show without you guys. So we do like to start and end all of our live shows with a just very sincere appreciation and thank you for the support you guys give. So shout out to you guys, patrons.
Yeah, shout out to everybody for keeping the wheels on our van going around, as we like to say, keeping the Vanguard in motion. But yeah, shout out to everybody. Obviously, hit the like and subscribe button. You're all comrades to us, as we always say. But yeah, super excited for the show today, as I think Lance will be jumping on here in a second. As I understand it, not going to be able to see Lance's face. It will just be audio from him. So I don't know if that's part of his debate strategy, is just coming down like he's our internal monologue, like Morgan Freeman from Bruce Almighty. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to ask him about that. But anyway, he'll be in here.
Yeah, Lance should be here any minute now. And shout out to you, Bookworm Skates, for the first super chat of the live stream. Really appreciate it, Bookworm. Let's go live debate show. Yeah, these are our favorite kind of conversations. Always the time always flies by because Zach and I both get very passionate, and it's just really fun engaging with people when you disagree on certain things, and trying to reach common ground or trying to change minds, etc. So really excited to have this discussion. Again, I think it's one of the most important issues, and also one of the biggest disagreements I have with much of the left in this country right now, at least the liberal left, but even parts of the left, I think are a little bit too giddy about defending censorship and deplatforming and all that stuff. So I'm excited to chat about it and get even further into the weeds on this subject matter. But yeah, thank you so much, Bookworm.
Yeah, shout out to you, Bookworm Skates. Always good to see you in the chat. This will be a really good conversation. Also, shout out to you, Kelly. Vanguard debates and interviews are always fire every single time. And I think this is going to be a good, further, exploration into this. It's something that I just think that there's a lot of room for discourse to be had. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out once again to you, Bookworm Skates. Shout out Kelly. Vanguard debates interviews are fire every time. We like to think so. I think we're getting better and better at debating, Zach. We're not as experienced as Lance is at debating or a lot of other people in this space. But, I think we've taken on some pretty heavy hitting opponents at this point and really strengthened our skills. Not that we have a perfect track record by any means. But, I'm pretty proud of the work we've accomplished. And I hope that this is another, feather in the cap.
Yeah, it's funny actually. My homie Peyton, who watches our show sometimes, was like, "Yeah, you guys seem to have like a really ironed out like good cop, bad cop routine." And I was like, "Is that something that you guys like planned? Is that part of your like discourse to catch your opponent off guard?" I was like, "No, this is just how Gavin and I are, 100% authentically." Because sometimes we'll be the good cop and bad cop against each other, and we had that experience after Sam Cedar. But yeah, no, it just works out that way. That I feel like we have a good chemistry on the mic, and so we try and balance that when we're debating. Obviously, that doesn't always translate to a W, but in the world of Debate Me Bros, every debate is a W. You just declare yourself the victor at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna shoot Lance a message and see if he's still good to go. One sec. Just making sure he gets into the StreamYard call. And the debate should be starting any minute. So make sure you guys sit tight. Again, hit that like button if you haven't already. Really, really helps out. Really appreciate that, guys. But yeah, it's about to get going. The rubber's about to hit the road. And obviously we've talked to Lance, multiple times in the past. He's a good faith actor, in my opinion. So I'm excited to have a civilized discussion on this subject matter. I think that it's going to be a very interesting exchange of ideas, if nothing else. But yeah, I do hope to, change not only his mind, but the mind of his audience. As always, when you go into a debate, that's half the point in the first place is, trying to articulate your perspective in a way that could potentially change people's minds, not just of the person you're debating, but that of their audience. So, that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, he should be in here any minute now.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited about that. Anything else that you wanted to chat about while we just fucking kind of kill time and wait for Lance here? I know that this is always one of those like weird things where it's like, I don't know how much time we have, so I don't want to get into anything, and then have Lance arrive and be like, well, we just read you the headline of an interesting topic and we're going to fuck off now and not talk about it. So yeah, I guess I can give you guys the nice weather report. It has been heating up. We had the pump fake of fall, right? The fake fall, the fall that makes you dream of fall, and then 90 degrees outside and slightly humid. So that was a huge bummer. We're living that L here in the studio, as you guys know. We always relay the weather to you because this is a very old building, and we like that it's old and it hasn't been fucked with and modernized too much. But that means that the fucking heating and cooling is a little rough.
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, though, we're able to get it pretty cool up here. Record as long as we set the AC to the right temperature, like 30 minutes beforehand or whatever. But yeah, it is definitely a little bit toasty outside. I'm ready for the real fall to hit. Although we're definitely getting there. It's nowhere near as bad as it was like a couple weeks ago. And by the way, Bert, we also debated Lance on this issue back in the day when that was popping off. So we technically have debated Lance before. This is just the first like official, sanctioned debate or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we've gone back and forth with Lance on a couple different subject matters, that being one of them. Hopefully it's just as lively a chat this time. Again, Lance should be here any minute now. Sent him the StreamYard link. So everyone just sit tight and hit that like button while you're at it, and hit that subscribe button too if you're not already. Make a lot of good content here at the Vanguard, so you're gonna want to see it. But yeah, Lance should be here. Oh, here we go. Lance, what's up?
Okay, so you see what I mean by OBS virtual camera? You'll see like my whole stream, and it's actually gonna get kind of meta because I'm gonna bring you guys over in the corner now.
Oh shit.
Oh, this is gonna look. I mean, it's not too bad.
It's not horrible. I'd rather people be able to see you at all than not at all. So I'm glad that. You know what I'm saying though. Like I'm glad we have some visual to interact with. It's not just your disembodied voice.
Yeah, no, I agree. I prefer that. Even though like there is times like the other day I was debating Loner Box about the Queen, and I had to put just like stock footage in the background, and I ended up of the royal family, and I ended up getting copyright striked on it.
What? Were you besmirching the legacy of Her Majesty the Queen, Lance?
Apparently. I mean, I'm in Canada, so she's technically my queen as well. Well, she was.
Oh yeah, Canada is part of the Commonwealth. Yeah, you're right. God save the king. Am I right?
Oh yeah, hell yeah! Can't wait to see
I'll have to
Charles
check
over
out that debate, though. I have a feeling I probably agreed a lot more with you than whoever you said you were debating. I saw that you guys were doing that, and I was like, I know I agree with Lance more on this one.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'll in the spirit of saying nice things, by the way, I have really been enjoying your show lately. I watched your debate with Aaron Matei, and I was like, that was finally someone held that little child clown accountable for a bunch of shit. Like that was fantastic.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. And yeah, we've said before. Obviously, we're big friends of or fans of your show as well. Consider you a friend of our show. And also, I like this dynamic here because we are very Midwestern on the microphone, and I feel like Midwesterners, and Canadians are very like kindred spirits in how we view like our outlook on a lot of things. So it's always nice to have you in here.
Awesome. So you debated Sam Cedar. I watched it. I took issue with a lot of things that are being said. How did you like it? I should ask that maybe at the start. How did you enjoy it?
I thought it was a really fun time from my perspective, right? I first, Gavin and Sam got into it, jumped in there a little bit, and then Gavin and I got to hash out a little bit of our disagreement. So I thought it was very well-rounded. You got to see like a very full gamut of, somebody like Gavin's view on this, whereas it's a little different than mine, and then, a bit more different than Sam Cedar's. And, but I'm interested to know what you, wanted to push back on so we can discuss it further.
Yeah, I would agree with Zach that it went really well. In retrospect, obviously, there's always going to be a few things that you wish you worded differently, or maybe I wish I said this a little bit differently, or push back on this thing versus that thing, or whatever. But for the most part, I'm pretty proud with how we conducted ourselves in that one, and I stand by everything I personally said as far as my position goes. So yeah, I'd be really interested to hear specifically what you disagreed with us on, and where you differ.
You said something in that debate where you were like, the left should be basically aligning themselves with the concept of free speech and the First Amendment. And I'll say this as a Canadian, so I don't actually fall under the purview of the Constitution of America. I fucking love the First Amendment to the Constitution. Big fan. I support it wholeheartedly. I think the government should not enact laws that infringe upon the freedom of the press, the freedom of religion, or the freedom to gather and publicly demonstrate. I'm all for that. I don't believe that applies in any way to private companies. I don't think you have a right to walk into your job and call your boss the N-word and not face any consequences from it, from your employers, stuff like that. And I think the dangers under capitalism is that these corporations have grown to such sizes that they control not just the public forum, but the world forum. And as a result of that, we're trying to grapple now with this very complex issue of, why is this free speech? Do we have the ability to say whatever we want? Should we have the ability to say what we want? That's basically where I come at this from.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can just jump right in there and address what you've said. Do you agree that these days, especially 2022, as far as starting a career, for example, or really being a part of the public discourse in any way, would you agree that you, for the most part, have to have access to the internet and social media platforms?
A career in broadcasting or entertainment? Is that what you're asking?
I mean, honestly, a career in just about anything. I think that the internet is, and social media specifically, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. I think that these platforms are pretty essential as far as having a presence online, as far as being successful in the modern day economy. Like, you would agree with that these companies kind of become the new public square?
I think that people should have access to the internet. I think the internet should be a public utility, but whether or not an employer will employ you based on your social media presence, I don't agree with that at all.
Well, when it comes to the public utility thing, would you agree that much like, I mean, and we could argue that that's not how it is, but would you argue that companies like social medias, for example, should be treated the same way that phone companies are, like in the same way that they're public utilities, and a phone company wouldn't remove someone's ability to, talk to other people on the phone if they were saying racist things or problematic things?
Well, the difference is, unlike a phone company where you will have the ability to call one person, right? So, and I don't know if that's true. Is a phone company, or are you allowed, if you use your phone line, to call people and threaten them, or say horrifying things, or do Holocaust denial? Is the phone company still going to maintain your phone presence? I don't know if that's the case.
That's
but
100% in America. I don't know. I can't speak for Canada, but I can say that that's been litigated extensively in America, and they will not. You can be tried for crimes, and evidence from the phone companies can be used to put you in jail, right? Like, so getting your phone records. But that, like, if say I'm in jail, right, like I can still, like, I can talk on the phone, or say I've committed a crime. Like, I never get this like ethereal ban from AT&T where I'm not allowed to speak, or I can't open up an account with Wise or Verizon because I have to check the felon box or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. See, the biggest difference between these two things is a phone line is not an amplifier. It's not going to be able to magnify and increase your presence. These people, when I say these people, we'll talk about Andrew Tate or Alex Jones or stuff like that. They, in these social media platforms, are being amplified by highly advanced AI algorithms that are basically fine tuned to make individuals spend as much time on a platform as possible. So it's giving them way more voice than they ever had before. Like if you talk to or watch extremist experts who talk about de-radicalization and stuff like that, they will bring up the fact that these individuals, when they continue to have platforms, voices, they grow to such a size, right? We have to start treating them when anyone has an audience of say 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, 1 million followers in the same sense. They have the same reach that broadcast does, and we regulate broadcast, right? In the US, you regulate it with the FCC. Over here in Canada, we regulate it with the CRTC. And like no one would bat an eye if HBO all of a sudden had someone who went on the show every day and talked about how you should drink bleach and it'll make your penis bigger or something like that. If they dropped him, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, why would HBO do that?
You brought up the example of using the N-word earlier, and Bill Maher, who works for HBO, he was quote unquote canceled, for using the N-word. That didn't result in him being pulled from HBO. HBO didn't pull him, and I would have disagreed with them had they decided to. I can disagree with Bill Maher's use of that word and call him out and criticize him as I did at the time and will continue to do. But do I think that would be grounds for his censorship? No.
Okay, but you have a bar and yours just isn't set there, right? But we as a society have collectively thought of and determined some bars. For example, if he had a show where he was describing in detail how to abduct and rape children.
Well, that's
right?
against the law, right? Like being a free speech absolutist. Being a free speech absolutist, as I consider myself, or maybe a free speech maximalist, if you want to be a little more technical, I don't think that means literally anything goes. If you're committing crimes online, if you're calling for direct threats of violence, I would even say doxing, although it lies in kind of a gray area legally, I would still consider that something that crosses that First Amendment line. I'm not arguing for complete and utter, Wild West, anything goes. I'm just saying that a lot of the examples of people that have been deplatformed and that have been censored by these giant social media conglomerates, these big tech oligarchs, so to speak, I don't think that the grounds for their censorship rises to that level. So you can bring up the most extreme possibilities and say, well, what if you're telling people how to rape babies or whatever you just said? But that's kind of a straw man. No one's arguing in favor of that.
Well, and if I could just jump in and try.
But you just established that you do have a line. Your line happens to be where it's going to legally harm people, right? Like that's where you limit free speech.
Isn't that what the First Amendment dictates, though? Like I'm just arguing that these companies should abide by the First Amendment.
To the government's ability to pass laws that restrict the freedom of the press, religion, and public gathering. That's what it's in relation to. We're discussing private corporations. These are private companies, right?
Well, I think this actually goes back to if we can root this into, and obviously the internet is different than anything that we've seen in the past. So I don't think it's directly comparable to anything like print, cable, television, or radio. But I think those are our best parameters and framework to work in, because I do agree with you, Lance, that I think that we should have a better FCC. I disagree with some of the framework that they operate under, but I'm not entirely opposed to having something like that regulates, I don't think that you should be able to say like Red Bull gives you wings, or, this drug cures cancer when it doesn't cure cancer. So obviously we have to have some sort of established, regulation there. I'm actually in favor of that. But what I think it comes down to is how have we historically chosen to interpret our First Amendment law, and then how does that directly apply to the internet as we see it now? And if you're interested in advocating for that change, that would be a political mission, but not necessarily something that I would observe as like already protected by our free speech laws. And to provide pushback to your more hyperbolic example, I'd like to provide one that I think has been historically covered and protected by the United States, and that's the Anarchist Cookbook, right? So that book has that people were like, this is dangerous, which it absolutely is. I don't know if you've read the Anarchist Cookbook. It's very dangerous. It will tell you how to make fucking bombs in your backyard. It will tell you how to poison people. The guy essentially was a 17-year-old 60s radical, and he was like, we're going to war with the United States imperialist machine, and how do I teach all of my comrades, or the people who are down with this mission, to do all of these things? But through the confines of the way that the Supreme Court has consistently ruled on free speech, the publisher was able to put this into print. It became wildly popular for people to read, and you can't hold the guy that wrote it directly responsible for any of the crimes that are committed as a result of it. So I feel like this conversation is really ironing out, where have we already ruled that you are protected by free speech, establishing where that line is. And then I think the rest is obviously going to be just political disagreement, right? But would you say that there are some fair analogies there to being problematic? And I think the guy has said on like 10 million occasions that he deeply regrets publishing the Anarchist Cookbook, because there have been a million messages and letters sent to him of people who have been killed, both trying to, do, even if it was for righteous causes like liberation and all these kinds of things. He's, deeply troubled by it. There's a whole documentary about it. But he's also, steadfast in the sense that it's like, legally he's not culpable. So do you think that there's that line that exists as well for, podcasting on the internet?
Well, I think we have to maintain focus of what each of these things is, because you said the closest thing that's comparable would be like FEC regulations, right? And I agree with you. I don't agree with all kinds of FEC regulations, especially when they pertain to the naughty words you can't say, right? There's like a list of like, slurs and stuff that is banned to say on the radio. I think Carlin had a whole routine on that. But there's a difference between that and amplifiers. In the case of someone who's publishing a book, the publisher themselves would be the amplifier of that information, not just the author of the Anarchist Cookbook. If he just talked about the Anarchist Cookbook at his dinner table, the only people who would ever learn about how to make all these weapons or whatever would be the people there. If there's a publisher that then takes that literature and then publishes it and amplifies it, then we'd be talking about them as the category of the people.
But as the publisher, they were found time and time again to be criminally unaccountable for publishing information, right? Even though it was people, they did a good job. Like I'll be honest, like they linked inexplicably death to this book. However, because of the free publishing laws that have been established in the United States, and again, I don't know what they're like in Canada. There's a whole. It's an interesting doc on Netflix if anybody wants to see. I'm not pulling this out of my ass.
Yeah, I'm watch it. Awesome.
But it essentially argued that neither him nor the publisher could be criminally held accountable. So I would say that it both as a content creator and as a amplifier, as you were calling them, they would both be in that instance clear.
Okay, so when it comes to the internet, I guess the closest thing we could talk to that's in relation to your example is Section 230. I actually like parts of Section 230 because I think it is a good concept in theory, where it's like we determine in good faith that the publishers of these websites, for example, are not going to be directly responsible for the content of the website for the people who are publishing it. And when that first comes out, it makes sense in the sense of forums, right? You have a whole bunch of people. Your company's never going to grow unless there's a lot of users who use it. But should you be personally responsible as a company for every single thing the person posts? But that doesn't mean if someone then posts, hey, here's the address of all the Jewish people that I want to eliminate from the earth or something, and this is a criminal act, that the company itself isn't supposed to then enact. Like, it's in good faith that they will then remove material that they consider to be vile, horrible, disgusting, all that kind of stuff. That applies to these companies, like the YouTubes, the Twitters, the Instagram, all the social media. And the thing that like I don't get about kind of the free speech absolutist take when it comes to YouTube or stuff like that is why we're always using it to defend the worst horrifying individuals. And I know people are like, well, you have to stand up for like the worst members of society, but I don't have any control, neither do you. None of us have any say in this whole arena. None of us get to choose when someone is deplatformed or whatever. I've been deplatformed twice. I've had both my YouTube channels deleted off the internet because people mass flagged them, right?
And we defended you in that instance as well. We're not just defending the worst faith actors.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But in the instance of someone like Andrew Tate, who is, someone who's under investigation for human trafficking, who's actively telling people that women are responsible for their own rapes and stuff like that, and who has grown and been amplified by these corporations to such a size that he is now printing cash off this and just indoctrinating younger generations through TikTok. If TikTok is saying like, we are going to remove this person, I'm not going to sit back and be like, oh, well, I have to speak about the essence of free speech in this moment. Like, I think it is a benefit to have like that no longer on the platform.
There's a couple things I want to address. First of all, when it comes to the algorithms, I think we actually are in agreement here. I'm not pro, big tech companies and the way that they're shaping the discourse by any means. I think there's a lot of regulation that makes a lot of sense. I think there actually is existing legislation that hasn't passed yet that would regulate the algorithms as far as exactly the problems you're talking about, where it comes to, taking vulnerable young minds or whoever on the internet and constantly exposing them to more and more extreme viewpoints, kind of leading them down this rabbit hole. We saw that a lot in the lead up to 2016 with this alt-right content and stuff. Like, I think there's a very serious argument for regulating specifically the algorithms of these social media, because you're absolutely right. That is a huge amplifier. And oftentimes it's amplifying the right wing over the left wing constantly. Like, even if you watch a left wing show like the Vanguard, a lot of times, when the video ends, it'll immediately autoplay fucking Jordan Peterson someone that we are in no agreement with whatsoever, share very few values with, etc., if any. So I think that's a huge issue, and I would totally be down to tweak the algorithm, kind of edit the algorithm to try to avoid that sort of right-wing radicalization, because again, all that these companies care about is their bottom line, and they just want to direct people towards the who's going to get the most engagement, etc. They don't actually care about anything else. So I think there's a very legitimate argument for that. But would I say that the answer to the problem is to deplatform Jordan Peterson or like censor him in any way? No, I don't think that's the correct approach here at all. I think that, the left has much better arguments than a guy like Jordan Peterson. I think that we should, respond to his talking points and debate him if possible, and try to expose and destroy his viewpoints and perspectives, which often are very problematic and bigoted. But I don't think that censorship's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea to teach people, especially young people that are growing up in the internet era for the first. I mean, these people don't even know anything before the internet. I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't have social media and stuff like that, so I still have some remembrance of that. But kids these days, to sound like a fucking boomer, all they've ever known is the internet. And I don't think that it's a good thing to teach them that, the correct way to handle an incorrect viewpoint or a problematic viewpoint is just to scrub it from existence and pretend like it doesn't exist. Because as I said to Sam Cedar, there's this kind of liberal way of thinking of like out of sight, out of mind. If I don't have to look at it, then no one is looking at it. But that's not true. When you censor these people, they're just going to go to some further and further right-wing echo chamber, some company or social media platform that is literally just full of a cesspool of Nazis and actual, right-wing extremists and horrible people, places like fucking 4chan or whatever. Yeah, exactly. All these companies. And I think that they're festering there and strengthening those platforms by taking their business from a place like YouTube, for example, or Twitter, and funneling those people and their audience into those echo chambers, again, furthering the radicalization. So yeah, I actually don't think it should be celebrated when some loser like Andrew Tate is censored or some loser like Alex Jones is censored. I don't think that's a good thing. And not just because of the reasons I just laid out, but because I do believe in having a principle. And when it comes to, defending the First Amendment and free speech, which I understand these companies don't technically have to abide by, I still think there's something to be said, though, for defending the principle of the First Amendment. And yeah, I do think that a true embrace of freedom of speech means that means Alex Jones has the freedom of speech too. And yeah, you could say that he was found guilty of defamation. Well, once that happens, maybe it's a different story. But until you're found, criminally responsible for defamation or something like that, you said Andrew Tate's under investigation for human trafficking. That's true. And maybe he's guilty. And if so, fuck Andrew Tate. But lots of people are under criminal investigation. We have like black radicals and socialist radicals and eco-terrorists and all kinds of people that are under investigation. Do you really think that's a good precedent to set, that because someone, is under criminal investigation, that they should have their platforms removed and the, corporate oligarchy just scrubs them out of existence and gives them the, death penalty?
So I have so much to say on what you just said. So at the very start of that, you were like, I want to limit the algorithms and the way they impact it so they don't have as much reach. You're actually kind of advocating for, you want to limit their ability to be amplified by these social media platforms, which in a sense is kind of agreeing with what I'm trying to talk to you about here. Yes, Jordan Peterson has some terrible ideas. This is not something in which I think you can broadly apply a one-size-fits-all answer. It's something that requires like nuance, a case-by-case basis. There's obviously going to be people who have terrible ideas I definitely disagree with, which yes, should be debated in the marketplace of ideas. Let's go up against Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, whatever. There's other people who are directly doing actions that are resulting in people being damaged and or even committing suicide, as was the case with Alex Jones.
You don't think that same case could be made for Jordan Peterson, though, about his words having a harmful effect on trans people and that leading to some percentage of suicide or whatever?
So we can open up the stochastic terrorism discussion right afterwards and then start going down that road. But I want to talk to you about what you had just mentioned, because specifically, if you were talking about, I want to limit these people's ability to continue to be amplified by these companies, then you have to be able to treat it on a case-by-case basis, and you have to be able to set certain standards and practices. You both already established that there are things in which you do not think there should be absolute free speech. If it's going to be, your measure is just basically, I will only do what the laws of the land permit, and that's where I'm going to set my limits, that's fine. Other people might have other reasons or standards they want to apply, but broadly speaking, this is something on such a scale that we have to start treating each case on a case-by-case basis, and whether or not each one has merit. And that's genuinely the only way you're going to be able to apply whether or not something is or is not worthy of censorship.
Yeah, can I jump in really quickly? Because I think that part of this, conversation that we're having is really also simultaneously it's about free speech, but it's also about how much power that these companies have, which I think might be a place that we have tremendously more agreement, right? Like obviously Gavin and I over here, we're firm antitrusters, right? Like I believe in breaking up a lot of these corporations.
Oh, hell
Lance,
yeah.
do you think that some of your concerns would be assuaged if Twitter and Facebook and these large corporations were broken up, so as the fact that, you know, it's not just one, you know, tyrannical over being, but we can actually kind of collectively come together and say, okay, well, YouTube isn't powerful enough to just set the table for what everything is. Now we have to, as a society, come in and, you know, evaluate this. I think that that might be an interesting place to start. Now, obviously, we would debate the extent to which we were going to regulate them afterwards, but I think it makes complete sense for us as all lefties to be like, okay, here are these tyrannical oligarchic powers. They control way too much of our, you know, commerce, our time online, our eyeballs, our brain, everything, right? And as a result, they've gained so much power over our ability to communicate with one another and what is societally acceptable, what is not, what is criminal, what is not. These lines have, you know, apparently become really blurred. I just think that perhaps the first step, instead of you know, doing targeted bannings against people, right, which I agree with Gavin, typically does send them to a more remote, insulated, hateful group of individuals. In fact, one of my favorite ContraPoints quotes ever was when she was just shredding Jordan Peterson, and she was like, a lot of people don't want to engage with Jordan Peterson's ideas because they're so terrible, but I'm not afraid of anybody's ideas. And then she goes on to systematically one by one be like, I'm a fucking trans woman, and let me just like fucking destroy you on every hateful remark you've ever made about my community and dozens of others. And I think that that's very, very effective. And I think that, you know, while we could have some conversations about how corporations are profiting off of misinformation and, you know, how they're manipulating the algorithm, I feel like it's way easier to just go after the big guy, the corporate entity, right? Say we're going to regulate everybody a little more fairly, and then it doesn't look like it's so much just like finger pointing at people who are, you know, stirring up a lot of ruckus. And obviously, a guy like Andrew Tate is completely condemnable and detestable and a fucking just.
Yeah, I know the two of you don't support Alex Jones, what he says. I know the two of you don't support Andrew Tate. I know you're not massive misogynist racists. That's not what I'm here to talk about. And in relation to what Gavin mentioned, I also don't think the solution to these big problems is just 100% pointing the finger and be like, we have to get rid of that person. If we just whack them all and hit each one of these bad people, these things go away. They don't. The Andrew Tate can be gone. They're still fresh and fit. There's still Sneeko. There's still an entire misogyny ecosystem that is making so much money because algorithms love that shit right now. It is in vogue. It is like, this is the shit that will get you clicks, views, likes. If the two of you want to blow up, just become hardcore misogynists. That's what everyone's buying into. There has to be other stuff in place that meets that, and not just like, you know, is obviously like, hey, by the way, hating women is not poggies. That shouldn't just be it. There has to be places where people feel comfortable, especially young men, being able to ask questions. They can have answers. I highly recommend r/menslib, the subreddit. There has to be that as a counterpoint. Those are just band-aids. They are little band-aids on a much bigger problem, and most likely the problem is usually stemming from mass alienation, people's material conditions not being met. That leads them to find like other reasons why their lives are fucked, and then they find those people on the internet, or they're having trouble, like, you know, as a high school kid. Being a high school kid fucking sucks. It's vicious. We all know how bad it was, unless you two were like the super popular jocks who had sex every day. I don't know. Maybe that's your story. Was not mine, but high school fucking sucks. But anyways,
not me either. Don't worry.
So you're having a really hard time. You go home and boom, your parents aren't at home because they have to go work two jobs or whatever. Fucking, you know, this is the problem with everyone suffering under capitalism simultaneously. And then you go on the internet because you're looking for answers, and boom, you find these people who are edgy, who make really offensive jokes, who say really offensive things, stuff that no one else says. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I like this Andrew Tate. No one else is saying fucking you should beat women. This is fucking hilarious. He's so funny. And then you start going down that rabbit hole, and it crosses over with white supremacy because boom, all of them are saying, hey, by the way, did you know about IQ and the Jewish question and all this other kind of stuff? And then boom, you've got a radicalized individual who's going down that pipeline.
Yeah, but that's nothing new. Like that's kind of how it always has been.
Application online 100% is. This never existed in the same way. Listen to Robert Evans talk about this, because he used to analyze this stuff way back in the day. There was a big problem with white supremacy in the United States around the 1990s, and you know, basically a surgence of it. And once it got quashed, all of a sudden these communities moved heavily online and started to recruit and indoctrinate online. And that ability to do so is being amplified for profit by these massive companies. That's where there's a huge problem.
So just so we are clear, what exactly is your solution to this problem? If it's not just banning everyone you disagree with or think is problematic, what would you say is the solution?
So this doesn't have an easy answer. There's not a one size fits all answer for this, because when I was studying, and because I wanted to do research on extremism, they've said that there is no scalable solution to de-radicalization. Some people get de-radicalized because they watched the debate, bro, and they really were like, oh wow, that person just got owned. Some people get de-radicalized because they watched a ContraPoints video and she uses a lot of the language of the alt-right in her videos, and they're like, oh wow, I'm learning some things. But there isn't a mass scalable solution to that problem. This is something that needs to be met in a multitude of different ways. Yes, from a corporate standpoint, we do not have free internet. We have to accept that. We have to stop giving up this territory to these massive corporations and saying they are the arbiters of speech. Free internet does no longer exist. In the good old Web 1.0 days that I know you were hearkening to, talking about how it used to seem like we lived in the Wild West, everyone could do anything. Now there's about 5 or 6 corporations that control all the websites that we visit.
You're saying those companies shouldn't be the arbiters of free speech, yet we should give them the ability to ban people arbitrarily based on what they deem as problematic?
They have the ability. That's the problem. The corporations are dictatorships. They're controlled by boards and fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders.
I disagree with that.
You disagree that they control that?
No, I disagree with that. I think that we should not just let them ban people willy-nilly, because in addition to supporting the principle of free speech,
we have no say. We have no control.
Well, that's like saying, why protest against, police violence or something? We don't have any control anyway.
No, absolutely. So if we identified the problem, then we can move forward with solutions. One of the things you're talking about, breaking up and using antitrust laws, yes, that would go a huge way to just breaking up monopolies. And monopolies are a massive problem in the United States right now. I am completely for removing, like even Elizabeth Warren proposed a bill that would remove Instagram from Meta, Facebook, and remove WhatsApp from Facebook, but that doesn't solve the problem. It's a multifaceted problem that requires.
So what's the solution then? So you think we should celebrate censorship where it happens, but that's not the solution?
No, you should identify it as, again, that is a band-aid on a fucking dam that is exploding. So if Andrew Tate no longer has an amplifying power the same way he used to, that's, again, a little band-aid, but doesn't solve the problem of monetized and hyper-misogyny becoming this huge, big thing on the internet. So, again, the solution to that would have to be multiple different things. You would have to... Ooh, you just dropped out, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Gavin's still here, but he's fixing something on our... Keep talking, you can see.
Okay, all right. I'll just talk to your forehead for now. Oh. Now I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, sorry, we got a little fuck up on our end. Sorry, Lance.
No, that's okay.
Sorry about that, bro. I didn't mean to. My internet was bad, so I had to dip out and fix it really quick. I didn't mean to fuck up your whole shit.
It's okay. Is he coming back, or are you both still there?
We're both still here, yeah. There we go.
So like I said, the solutions to a lot of these things requires a multitude of different things. Yes, there should be oversight. If you listen to extremist experts, they want to start seeing some way of holding people accountable who have accounts that reach past 100,000 if they are directly doing things that result in, say, stochastic terrorism. If they're like, the libs of TikTok is a good example of this. They're allowed to do things like directly lie. They're lying about the fact that Boston Children's Hospital is cutting off kids' genitals. That is not true. They do not do that. That is not something that is happening, but they can lie about that. And then Boston Children's Hospital gets multiple death threats. Her Higher Right Check and Matt Walsh are doing that.
Yes.
And they're being paid handsomely to do it. Maybe not in the case of Higher Right Check, but Matt Walsh is certainly making tons of money off that.
Well, wouldn't that fall under defamation or something? Like, isn't there already a legal process to deal with that?
But the problem being is that if you wait for those defamation suits to go to the Alex Jones level, that takes decades sometimes. That takes forever. And in the interim, kids are not getting actual medical care because there are multiple bomb threats being sent into a hospital. So something has to be able to be preventative in that stage to be able to stop people from doing acts that will directly result in the loss of human life. I mean, like, and the problem is with like this kind of amplification, these kind of dangers, it's very easy to have plausible deniability. It's very easy for Matt Walsh to say, it was not me, it was Christopher Rufo. And for Higher Rachel to be like, it was not me, it was Matt Walsh, right?
I get the point you're making, but lots of speech could be considered dangerous. You know, one of the mantras of the mainstream media, for example, which is repeated all across the internet, is arguments in favor of America's foreign policy, our imperialist foreign policy, which, you know, kills thousands of people indiscriminately, you know, civilian death rates. These kind of practices are routinely defended on corporate media and by just normal people who have been inundated with a media diet that consists of corporate sources. Do I think people should have the right to make those arguments, even though you could make a link between those arguments and other people's deaths, you know, civilian deaths of our foreign militarism? I still think people should have the right to have those discussions. If that's true, if that's truly how you feel, that you think that, you know, a strong U.S. presence on the global stage is actually, for the better, not for the worse, and that, maybe it was a good idea to go liberate the Iraqis or whatever, and you support, or maybe you support Putin and what he's doing in Russia. I think you could very directly link that with violence that is happening, with human suffering and death. And I totally oppose those arguments, and will present the counter, the anti-war perspective. But would I want to censor anyone that is making those pro-war arguments? No, I think they should be debated and hopefully have their minds changed. I don't think that they should be removed from the internet or deplatformed because their speech is too problematic.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in a little bit here, Lance, I'm wondering. I think that part of the disagreement that we're having here rests on the fact that perhaps if because I'm trying to understand your step by step, because I know you said it's nuanced to you and that it's difficult. There's not a one size fits all band-aid for this, and so I'm wondering, if it's your argument that in the absence of that, we do just kind of keep going, what will give the impression to the regular voting electorate that we're just going willy-nilly on kind of how this is being upheld. Like, I understand your point about the Boston Children's Hospital bombing. We covered that on or the bomb threat, rather. Thank God nothing actually occurred. But I think you can talk about that, and I agree that Gavin's point about Rachel Maddow would be guilty of all that shit. You'd have to pull everybody down from the media if you're going to impose that equitably, right? So in the interim, while we're not going to be imposing that across the board, right? There's just no way that you could impose that logic across the board. If you were going to say like Matt Walsh should be banned from Twitter because of this, then everybody that's linked to a killing in news journalism would have to receive that treatment if we were going to have any kind of consistency.
What about just the videos, Zach? Would you be okay with that? Because I have personally had videos of mine taken down from mass flagging and they're still gone. I went to the Occupy trucker anti-vax rally and I trolled them, and I was running in the streets screaming, Justin Trudeau's putting his cum in the water supply. You're all drinking a semen. What's wrong with you? And it was just like, it's comedy, right? I upload that to YouTube. It got mass flagged by the anti-vaxxers and it's gone. I'll never get that video back. So my speech was censored in that respect. In the case of Matt Walsh, he is actively and knowingly lying to endanger this hospital, right? What if that video just was like, that video's removed? He's not removed from the platform, but just that video got taken down. Would that be okay with you if you could argue that this is directly relating to Boston Children's Hospitals getting bomb threats?
Yeah, I mean, I think if again, look, I don't think that the legal process should be as dragged out and class prohibitive and all of those different kind of things for establishing a defamation lawsuit. So I heed your point that it would be very long. And Gavin and I we got into a little bit of a debate about how we would best go about this ourselves. But I do think that you would probably need to require like a really big through line in order to say like, yeah, this guy did something at this hospital and now we can prove that this spawned that reaction. But then I still think it goes back to the fact that you look at the anarchist cookbook, right? And regardless of the fact that and again, like, we're using extreme examples, right? Because I think that we can find more innocuous examples.
It's how you find people's minds. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that same argument, if I have to argue that Matt Walsh's piece should come down because of his disgusting rhetoric, right? And the threat that caused to a children's hospital, then I also have to argue that you can't have the anarchist cookbook published in America for profit because it could be used and correlated back to it. And that is not the precedent that we've set here. And we've set that, for a good reason, I think, because that way, Gavin likes to use the chemicals of mass destruction analogy, right? Like, if you were saying that in 2002, you could easily be flagged for disinformation. You could easily be removed. And then now I would be culpable in clamoring for that. And actually, I would just say across the board, obviously, I don't think that your video, I saw some of your guys' trucker rally content. It was really funny. But obviously, I don't think that should be taken down or censored at all. And so my argument would be that, you roasting these people getting taken down is exactly why I don't support any videos getting taken down, because I think it's better to have somebody, with a better political fucking understanding than these right-wing truck drivers being out here making these points, debunking them, making it look like the sideshow that it is, and not a serious, legitimate working class movement. Why are there only white people here? How much of the working class is people of color? Those are all great arguments, right? And I think exposing that shallowness actually, served a purpose, especially when you had so many people who were on the left that got so enamored by these trucking protests and, all this stuff. And it was like, wow, look at what these truckers are doing. And this is what, all these kinds of things. So I thought that was very valuable content, and I don't want to see that taken down. And obviously, I I wouldn't care from like a personal perspective if Matt Walsh's content got taken down. But I just think that creates that through line where if it's going to happen to Matt, it's going to happen to you. And since we've already established that there is no rigor, there is no rhyme or reason to how this goes down, it's all so selective that it would put the left in a unique place if if YouTube just decides that, okay, you know what, the right wing is our audience, fuck everybody, right? So now it's going to be you that's uniquely targeted because you're dunking on right wingers and that's their bread and butter. And now we can no longer get in and actually, destroy Steven Crowder when he's being a fucking idiot, or I can no longer talk about how Tucker is anything but a populist in actual practice and he's just a rich imperialist.
Right, totally. So my argument to that, would be that it's already happening to the left, and we can provide more examples beyond my own at the very start. And then the second one being what Gavin said during the Sam Cedar debate, and we haven't really touched on here, with the idea of, say, extreme examples. Nick Fuentes, Holocaust denier, white supremacist, neo-Nazi, whatever you want to call him. He got deplatformed off a lot of these platforms, but then he went off and created his own network, Cozy TV. So that's what scares you. What if these people just go off into their own little echo chambers? First off, if it was more beneficial and more amplifying for him to do that, every single extremist would start, instead of going on these social media platforms, which is where they all start out, they would just start their own. So I don't agree with that argument that like we should watch out or they'll just go off into that place. And if you want to de-radicalize them in those spaces, you then have to enter those spaces. So you have to go on Odyssey. People always ask me, why are you on Odyssey? Isn't it like a cryptocurrency hosting site? And I'm like, when I put my videos on Odyssey, they and the comments are filled with the worst horrifying things I've ever seen and said about me in general, because it's always fucking just, it's psychic damage. But there will be one or two people be like, fucking hate the serfs, he's blah blah blah, race traitor, but kind of agree on this one point. That's you entering those arenas and those spaces, trying to, I guess, deprogram or de-radicalize them. I'm probably not the best person for that. I completely accept that. Other people would be better, but that would be my argument for that. If you two want to be and focus on de-radicalization, which I don't know if that's one of your things, then go on to Cozy TV or go on to one of those platforms or go on to Rumble or Gab or Parler or anywhere else where these people are gathering. That's different than if these people don't have the power to be amplified by these massive companies that have very advanced AI that are amplifying them, right? And again, extreme examples, because we've already kind of, I think, agreed that it should be a case-by-case thing. Jordan Peterson going on his show, talking about how when women wear lipstick, it's because they're trying to induce sexuality in the workplace. Debate that. For sure. Get in there. Fucking squash those ideas, right? Point out his fucking late misogyny, whatever the case. Someone else who's like, hey, by the way, Sandy Hook wasn't real. The parents are faking it. The kids never died. They're crisis actors, to the point where everyone's like, oh shit, look what Alex Jones said, calling up the dad. He gets so much harassment that he kills himself. That's a very different example. Like, I think we can agree.
But again, there are legal processes in place. Like, for example, the Dominion voting machines or whatever, they threatened legal action against, I think, Fox News and One American News Network for spreading these false conspiracy theories about how Dominion voting machines were used to subvert the true election of Donald Trump or whatever. And those websites pretty quickly stopped those news platforms they quickly stopped trotting out that line because they were afraid of the legal action. So why is that not enough already? Like, why, if you really think there's such a case for defamation, then why can't we just let the courts handle it rather than letting these shadowy tech oligarchs and corporate conglomerates make these decisions behind closed doors without any transparency? You say a case-by-case basis, and I agree with that. These should be decided on a case-by-case basis, but I think there should be some transparency involved in that process, not just all of these companies getting together overnight and deciding that they're all simultaneously going to drop certain people that they view as problematic, whether that was Alex Jones or Andrew Tate. I don't think that really has a case-by-case situation. I think they just decided to do that with no transparency or accountability. And the same thing could happen to any of us. The same thing could happen to any left winger. And you say, well, it's already happening to left wingers. Yeah, that's why I'm freaked out about it. That's why I'm trying to push back on this, because it's already happening and it's only going to get worse. And as two people, Zach and I, who do traffic and radical left-wing talking points and viewpoints that are often outside of the mainstream when it comes to capitalism, imperialism, or even touchy, controversial subject matters like Israel, for example. I don't want that precedent to be set, and I think we should fight back against it as much as possible, regardless of whether or not it's already happening.
But in the case, again, of defamation, incredibly difficult to win, especially in the United States. B, takes such a long fucking time, and C, is so expensive. So that's just not a reasonable solution to these problems to say, well, if an Alex Jones gets out there and causes someone's death because of the things that he's directly
So
saying,
we should open up the libel laws. We should open up make it easier for people to sue one another for defamation.
That's not the only route or solution to this. I don't think the solution to people spreading dangerous misinformation is like we should just sue them, and then 10 years later we'll find out whether or not what the courts or the jury has to say about this. Like, again, there are other countries, by the way, you can look towards the EU, that have imposed restrictions on big tech. They've actually taken on big tech, and the United States has taken on big tech a couple times, even though there doesn't seem to be a lot of energy about that right now in the Joe Biden administration. That's an entirely different topic, but you can do things. And it's not just like when I say multifaceted solutions, yes, breaking up big tech, breaking up all monopolies, to be totally honest. Antitrust law should be applied to all monopolies. We live in a current age where fucking, what is it, two companies produce all the beer, 4 companies run all the airlines, like 5 companies control the tech, 5 companies control all the media. That is fucked. Yes, we need to begin separating that, and that should apply broadly to capitalists too, because do you like competition? Do you like fair markets? Do you like all this kind of shit? Well, you don't have it. You just have these fucking complete dominations of these collaboration. But anyways, that's one thing. Another thing would be imposing restrictions on these big tech companies so that do not be, I don't want to use the word cucked, but it's almost as if people are accepting that they are the arbiters of speech, and we just have to
Well, they are right now. You're talking about a hypothetical. You're talking about a fantasy utopia, which unfortunately we don't currently live in. I agree with you. That would be great if, I feel like the same thing happened with Sam Cedar. He's like, well, in my ideal world, we'd open up the tort laws or whatever and make it easier for people to sue Spotify for profiting off of the disinformation that Joe Rogan spreads and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I would agree with that, but that's not the world we're living in right now. And what we're talking about is the cheerleading of actual censorship and deplatforming that does happen via an arbitrary process that we are not at all privy to, that there's no transparency or accountability for, and they could just as easily be weaponized against either of our channels. So no, I'm not in favor of that. And if you want to talk about some hypothetical legislation that might fix the problem, we can agree on that.
Okay, so I think what it comes down to is if I lose my channel again, if they deleted my channel again, I lose my ability to make money off this and be a media figure and be an entertainer. That's what I lose. And the real free speech discussion never centers around the things that actually are impacting people's lives, I think, on a regular basis, especially workers and protesters. People,
now you're cooking yourself to big tech because you're saying that, oh, well, if I got my channel removed, who cares? Because there's bigger fish to fry. I do care about your free speech.
Yes. And I'm glad you do. And I think there should be. If I was using my channel to deny the Holocaust and tell people you can cure COVID by drinking bleach, I would hope then that you would be like, oh, well, I don't know if we need to defend this individual because he's actually enacting danger.
So you don't think there's any such thing as a principle?
Basis.
Lance, yes, you don't think so? What about the Skokie?
Okay, free speech. We have to be very clear on this. The First Amendment to the Constitution, that principle, of which I completely agree with you with, and I think every leftist should be about the ability to criticize the people who govern you. And that is the most important thing.
It should be to say whatever the fuck you believe.
Because you don't want a monarchy. You don't want to be able to say, like, oh, the king eats poo, and then all of a sudden you get captured, killed, or put in prison. That is essential to a functioning democracy.
Okay, agreed. I think that free speech in general is essential to a fundamental democracy and to a flourishing democracy. And just a question, I'm interested in your answer. Do you support the 1978 decision by the ACLU to defend the neo-Nazi group that wanted to march through Skokie, a suburb of Chicago where many Holocaust survivors lived? Do you agree with that decision or no?
I don't know enough about it to comment on it. I don't like.
You don't?
I don't know enough about it.
Okay, can I jump in here? Because I think this is actually a compelling point that I wanted to also talk about with the Skokie, Illinois, right? Like you know, obviously, like this is a framework that we're operating under, and yes, my experience as a person that makes money live streaming is not as consequential as maybe like a trans person that got that committed suicide because of some fucking horrible thing that was done to them on Kiwi farms. Like I'm not trying to equate my livelihood to that kind of a horror, right? But what I am saying is that when you're talking about law and when you're talking about how you are going to regulate things, you have to use like a really like razor focused fucking through line on all of this. And I just feel like there's a point where you start opening up the door where, and we talked about this with Sam Cedar, where it's like I know you'll say that the left is already receiving like the bulwark of censorship, but I just feel like this is going to actively make it worse for us. And once they realize that there's way less money in censoring like, there's way less money in censoring conservatives than there is censoring leftists. I think that this will all kind of like turn around to bite us in the ass. And in the case of a thing like Skokie, Illinois, right? Noam Chomsky, he talks about how he's one of the few living scholars that criticize, the Holocaust and the fucking World War II as it was happening, in real time. And of course, he's of the Jewish faith, and this was all deeply personal for him. He speaks Yiddish. He's got a lot of family in Eastern Europe. I would imagine. He came out and said in defense of the Skokie, Illinois decision of the ACLU. He actually wrote a foreword that was used in a book by a fucking Holocaust denier, neo-Nazi fascist, one of the most odious writers in French history. But they put Noam Chomsky at the front of it because he was talking about how it is imperative that even in these most far-reaching, fringe people who are denying literal history that happened, that Noam Chomsky obviously knows actually happened, right? But he considered it to be too much of a devastating threat to the left, too much of a threat to fucking, remove our right to protest or remove our right to make content that the oligarchical overlords would be my like fucking, parallel that I'm grabbing for, right? Like by removing that right as a fucking like cement stone in the ground, and removing it from the same kind of rigorous legal, protections that have been established over 200 years, right? That's just not going to shake out well. And so I feel like that's directly applicable to where we are now, where of course marching in the street is less common than
it's more important.
But you know what I'm saying?
To allow the worst forms of speech to exist, because then like that's the free speech absolutist argument, right? It's more important to let a neo-Nazi have the right to be able to be a neo-Nazi on the street than it is to say try and censor that activity, because broadly speaking, if it is applied, society would be less healthy, or it would be more damaging to society. Is that what you're both saying?
I mean, I think that as long as that neo-Nazi is operating within the same parameters of free speech that the rest of us legally operate with under, like I'm not talking about organizing a fucking like actual militia group to cause harm to people of color and, non-white peoples and all that kind of stuff. But if you're talking about just marching, then yeah, or if you're talking about just espousing like odious rhetoric, then, I think time and time again, the Supreme Court and, they've ruled that you kind of have that right. And I would argue that you have that right on the internet if you have that right on Main Street.
But
yeah, would you disagree with that, Lance?
The First Amendment, again, applies to the government enacting laws. That's the government. So these are private corporations. This is separate. And the reason
I thought we agreed that we
can find that because, again, these private corporations have new technology that never existed back in the day, the ability to amplify these voices, the ability to make mainstream people suddenly be convinced of sometimes horrifying, damaging, or terrible ideas. The concept of like, there are certain things which we should permit, but it has to be, we permit everything and then we'll debate in somewhere in the middle. You've both kind of agreed you don't believe that for everything. You would not advocate for the right for people to publish child porn. You would.
That's different.
Because why is it different? That's where you're sitting.
Publishing child porn is directly profiting off of the literal victimization and abuse of a human being. You can't produce child porn without committing sex acts against a minor or a child. Having bigoted beliefs. Let me finish.
You agreed when I said if someone is describing how to abduct children and then
so then you're not. You can't say you're in favor of the First Amendment if you don't support people's rights to have problematic and bigoted viewpoints. I'm sorry, but that simply isn't how it works. And in the same way that the anarchist cookbook can lead
to the government enacting laws, and I'm a private corporation, and you agree that a private corporation shouldn't be allowed to just publish anything.
Lance, I'm saying it would be in our better interest. I'm saying it would be in our better interest as a democracy, as a society in general, if these corporations, which you're right, do not have to abide by the First Amendment. I'm saying it would be better if they did anyway. I'm not saying that that they have to. I'm saying that I don't think we should defend it when they don't. I'm saying when they don't act in accordance with the First Amendment, when they don't abide by the principles of the First Amendment, we should criticize it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that that they legally have to abide by it.
But again, there are examples, and you've used the that would be illegal. So that's where you set your standard. If it's something that's illegal, then fine. I'm not going to support the free speech.
Unfortunately, right? It's not illegal to be a Nazi.
but you still have that standard. It is legal to be a Nazi and to say, hey, this is the address of someone that I want you to go attack.
That's
or
not the
hey,
same.
you should go attack and kill all of a certain protected marginalized group.
Well,
And
that's a threat of violence. That's stop changing the goalposts. That's a threat of violence. We're talking being a Holocaust denier.
Where you set your speech.
Lance,
you would be fine if someone said,
okay, can you stop interrupting me? First of all, I can't even get my point out. There's a difference between literally saying, here's the address of a Jewish synagogue, go commit acts of violence, and saying that I don't believe in the Holocaust. Now, I hate to be in the position where I'm defending fucking Holocaust deniers. They're lower than scum. And just like with Andrew Tate and Alex Jones, I thoroughly reject it. I think it's a disgusting and truly problematic. I can even agree that it's potentially a dangerous viewpoint. Yes, that can lead to people's harm. But you have to acknowledge that there's a difference between that and doxing people and inciting violence against them.
Right. And you are setting a standard. You are establishing a standard in which you want to limit someone's ability to say certain things. For you, it's if they're going to be directly attacked or there's going to be direct harm come to them. But that's a standard you have set. So you do have a bar.
Well, but that bar, Lance, yeah, that's what I was going to add. You said you deeply respect the First Amendment, and that was kind of how we started this off as like a fucking, kumbaya agreement, right? But the First Amendment, hold on, man, just 1 second here. The First Amendment does establish that, right? And so I already said that we could have a political conversation about where we think those goalposts should be set, because we've agreed, and we have a lot more agreement here than the tension in the room would I think would indicate, right? So it's like we agree that we should not let these fucking corporations control themselves, right? And we agree that the First Amendment is a golden beacon of what we have to say. So what Gavin and I are arguing, Lance, is that we should start with what the First Amendment approves of, and the First Amendment absolutely does not approve of child pornography for the very obvious reason that Gavin laid out, which is that you have to actually commit a vicious, lifelong fucking crime that will, forever devastate and ruin this child in order to accomplish it, right? That being said, we have 200 years of legal jurisdiction. And yeah, I guess your position could be, let's throw all of this out and do exactly what I want. And I would grapple with those positions as you're going to present them. But if your position is that we should not let these companies regulate themselves, that means that the people have to govern them. And if the people are governing them, then we have to start with the Constitution and where the First Amendment falls and what the First Amendment protects. First Amendment protects your right to go out there and say, I'm a Nazi, I don't believe in the Holocaust. First Amendment does not protect your right to go out there and actually commit violent acts or plot to commit or threaten to commit violent acts against. That's harassment and intimidation, and those are all barred by the First Amendment. So I can go out on Main Street and I can say, I don't believe in the Holocaust, and I won't get in fucking trouble. But if I run up to somebody and say, all Jews should be put to death, or something fucking obviously fucking crazy, then yeah, that is a harassment state. That is a declaration of fucking, like, do you see how those things are different? One's protected by free speech, one's not.
Yeah, I'll lower the temperature. I know we're all getting a little yelly, me especially. So I'll lower it a little bit. I'll say here's the points where I think that we definitely do agree. I don't think that there should be corporate dictatorships that control the public forum. I think that there should be a better, more equitable system where workers own the actual companies in which they work, and that's not the structure that we have with tech monopolies. We can all agree on that, no problem. And I think we can establish and understand that, of course, the First Amendment doesn't apply to private corporations. So as long as private corporations are monetizing our social interactions, this is also a huge problem, and that there are methods and stuff that we should go about. When you said that you're just talking about kumbaya, pie in the sky ideas, Lance, this is not actually going to save anything. What we all, and this is just the three of us, actually have the ability to do is to advocate for stuff, because we're entertainers on the internet, right? So we can advocate for different kinds of things. You want to advocate for more of a free speech absolutist position because you think that this could eventually come to bite the left in the ass down the road, or you understand that it's already doing so in that respect. All that being said, though, in terms of like my advocacy in this arena, when it comes to this, when we tackle things like, let's say, the extreme racism and misogyny of an Andrew Tate, it is going to be, broadly speaking, better for society if someone like that has less of a massively powerful amplification machine working to spread his message to as many human beings as possible for profit. And that cannot be the only solution. At the same time, there has to be someone or something that is also meeting the needs of the people who are turning to an Andrew Tate. Why are they going to him? Why does he become popular? Why is that such algorithmic gold? Why are these companies being rewarded and making fuck tons of profit for promoting people who say it's totally, if you hate women, you actually should. You're going to be way more women.
Obviously, I agree with that. And obviously, there's a lot of problematic people with problematic viewpoints that are utilizing the systems that are currently existing as far as, communication goes to get their harmful viewpoints and messages out there. I will remind you of my point from earlier about how basically the entire mainstream media, the cable news, everything is a direct instrument of the U.S. empire in order to manufacture consent for their illegal and offensive wars that result in actual human death all around the world. And again, I don't think those people should be censored either, even though that I would say that their viewpoints and that their content is even more problematic and leads to even more death and violence than that of an asshole like Andrew Tate. So you're acting like this is some new phenomenon, like, oh, all of a sudden we have these guys like Andrew Tate spreading harmful viewpoints for the entirety of all three of our lives. That has already existed, just in a different form. And you could say the same thing about book publishers. Or, I mean, you can write books if you're a crazy right winger. You can make pro-war arguments and on cable news if you're a right winger. This is really nothing new. And to say that all of a sudden now we have to start censoring and deplatforming people because it would net benefit humanity. Well, yeah, there's a lot of people who, if they weren't allowed to talk, it would net benefit humanity. You know how many people have crazy, stupid, dumb viewpoints? Lots of people. I don't think the solution to that is just to ban them or to censor them. I just think that's a foolish road to go down.
I'm not saying that's the only solution, and we're going in circles because I stated before, a lot of these technologies are new. We didn't have advanced algorithms back in the day. We didn't have human connectivity through the internet. We didn't have the ability for billions of human beings to be able to influence and impact each other through these methods.
What about cable news?
Yeah, so cable news is overseen by the FCC, and a lot of the reasons being that if you have kids at home, should there be like anything playing on TV at any time, anywhere, all the time, right? And if you're going to be like, well, the parents should be the ones looking after those kids, true, but for poorer parents who don't have the time to supervise their kids all the day, well, is cable just going to have anything playing on it, right?
So you think the same change would apply to the internet then?
Once the internet, or once certain people, content creators, grow to a certain size. This is the exact thing that de-radicalization experts have been calling for. When people's but again,
you can make the same argument about people on cable news like Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow. All these people have an audience of a certain size, and they're actually paid a lot more than anyone online to espouse their toxic viewpoints and their violent viewpoints. I don't think those people should be censored either.
So in the case of I think the second Iraq war, which is the one that you were talking about with Sam Cedar, right? You were talking about, well, they were lying about a lot of things that were the prelude to get into the war, which absolutely, right? Yellow cake uranium, you name it. In terms of the people who were reporting on that, they were reporting the lies that the administration, the government of the United States was putting forward. They were like, hey, Colin Powell yesterday said that he has weapons of mass destruction. We need to be aware of this. Saddam Hussein will kill us all unless we do that. So that's not them knowingly either lying for profit, or if they are aware and they're just doing it for profit, that's something that I think would be actionable in the same way, right?
Right, but this demonstrates your acknowledgement that sometimes the quote-unquote correct position is fluid. If you applied your standards of disinformation to 2001 or 2002, then they could use that to justify kicking voices of dissent off the airways for spreading disinformation. If you were questioning the Colin Powell, uranium or whatever, and the weapons of mass destruction, then under your own logic, that could be cause to censor or deplatform, because that's not true. You're spreading disinformation. You're questioning what you just said was the government line that everyone was reporting on. So I don't agree with that either. I think people should be able to make the pro-war arguments based off of the information that is made available via the Department of Defense or the U.S. government. I also think people should be able to question that. And this kind of goes back to like the Joe Rogan vaccine thing. Like, do I think that Joe Rogan's arguments about the vaccine were correct? No. But do I think you should be able to make those arguments? Absolutely. Because in the past, there has been faulty vaccines. If you go back to the 50s and the polio vaccine, a lot of people did get injured because of that. They had to recall them and start all over. There was a huge controversy, and they had to bring out Elvis Presley to take the polio vaccine on television to assure everyone that it was actually okay to take this and that it wasn't going to hurt you. Is it possible that something like that could happen again? Yeah, obviously it is. And sometimes things change as far as what is true and what's not true because new evidence comes to light. I think those conversations should be allowed to happen.
Should Spotify be allowed to profit off it?
Absolutely.
So they should be allowed to profit off something that could result in tens of thousands of people dying.
I mean, that's what the cable news companies profited off of in the lead up to the Iraq war, and every other war that they manufactured consent for, along with every other thing that they profit off of. What do you think they don't profit off of? The fast food companies like McDonald's who sell ads that, destroy our country's health, or the pharmaceutical companies which poison whole communities with opiates. The mainstream media cable companies profit off of that stuff too.
So in a lot of those examples, especially when it comes to corporations, and this is kind of going directly back to what Sam said, because I completely agreed with him in the Spotify thing. They are passing the costs of the damage to society in a case of Joe Rogan onto the people who are listening. That's not something Spotify has to worry about. Spotify is never going to be directly held responsible if someone's grandpa died because they listen to Joe Rogan every single day, right? So in this respect, I'm not even someone who's advocating for the complete deplatforming of Joe Rogan, by the way. And on that same note, Spotify already does that. Spotify deplatforms Joe Rogan constantly. They delete episodes of his that they consider problematic with Alex Jones and everything. So, I mean, your argument for censorship would be there. But if you
I
have
don't agree
someone
with that either, by the way.
Yeah, fair enough. But if you have someone who's spreading dangerous medical misinformation, in the case of Joe Rogan, it's not just one time where he was like, I don't think you should take the vaccine. Like, if you look at the Media Matters article, there's multiple instances of him directly refuting actual science and evidence when it comes to the vaccine. And I know you guys aren't anti-vax, so I'm not trying to put that on you. But in that case, when it comes to Joe Rogan, add disclaimers at the start of the episode. Like the statements made by Joe Rogan are not in fact correct. It is medical misinformation. The vaccine is blah blah blah. Here's the truth and stuff. It does not represent, broadly speaking, Spotify or their information. And then boom, that would be again a case by case solution to a very complex problem.
Yeah, I know Gavin hates that solution. I'm more open to it. I think that if the company Spotify is going to do, I mean, it's the same thing that if you watch like a fucking Criterion film or whatever, or like the bonus footage at the end of a movie, they'll be like, the views and ideas expressed in this footage do not reflect the broad feel of like fucking Warner Brothers or whatever. So I mean, like, I wouldn't be having like a meltdown. I don't know if I would legally require that unless something had been like demonstrated and brought through court. Because I also think, like, obviously I'm not trying to be reductive at all, because I heed your point. And obviously we were massively critical of Joe Rogan. We dragged him on the show a lot, thought his ivermectin content was terrible. But I think that, in the same way, it's like, I don't keep wanting to go back to the same well of the anarchist cookbook, right? But I think that so I'll give it like a different example, right? Like I'll give it like, let's talk about The Catcher in the Rye, a work of fiction which has been blamed dozens of times for fucking mass shootings, the death of John Lennon, the guy that shot Reagan, right? And they'll be like, well, I was just so fucking in the world of The Catcher in the Rye. Like at what point is the publisher house for them responsible for that? Because time and time, I mean, it actually ruined J.D. Salinger's life. He internalized it severely. He was a recluse. He fucking hated that it happened. But time and time again throughout the 80s, when big high-profile assassinations, I mean, this is a legitimate documented thing in history, is that Catcher in the Rye became like this like woo-woo book because multiple fucking very public assassins or attempted assassins had been, moved by it, right? So I'm just saying, like, yes, Joe Rogan 100% did deliver medical misinformation on his show. I think that that's 100% fair and accurate to say. The question comes down to is this like, I mean, like, at what point are you going to find somebody like legally responsible for just saying what the fuck comes to their mind, right? Like, if I am sitting here saying like, oh, like, I think the X, Y, or Z is going to happen in relationship. Like, I don't think Joe Biden's going to like fucking, I don't know. All I'm saying is that you can predict something and be wrong about it and have it not be like a malicious thing. And so I think the line there is really blurry.
So I think a more direct example, because you could also point out that, like, didn't someone shoot Reagan because of Taxi or something like that, right? But like, how about
Taxi Driver, you mean?
He was inspired by that movie with Robert
Taxi Driver?
Yeah, Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, but the reason I think that one is kind of like it's kind of spurious, because it's like, well, it wasn't the purpose of the film. The person was inspired because they were in love with the actress, but like that doesn't mean that was a causal link, right? But a more direct one is the mosque shooting in Quebec. The person who did it genuinely said he was doing it because he was convinced and radicalized by online figures who were convincing him that there was an imminent threat to the safety of civilization, because Muslims, for the vast majority of them, are extremists and they're coming to murder every white person in society. It was shown, because they showed all the links of the things that he was watching, that the number one person that he was viewing was Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro had a video out, and it was the video that he was watching that was calling the myth of the radical Muslim minority. Now, he's since taken it down, but that video is a complete bullshit line, misconstruing Pew Research polls trying to show you that every single Muslim is in fact a potential jihadist and they're going to come and kill you. So in this case, this person committed a vile and horrifying act and was directly inspired by a specific video by a specific creator that we can point to. So there's no if, ands, or buts about like what exactly took place there.
So is the solution then to deplatform Ben Shapiro? Because I thought earlier you were saying we should debate him in the marketplace of ideas.
Right. So that video specifically, would you be okay with them deleting that video? like
Well,
taking
I would
it
actually,
away.
I would
That
actually push
it's no
for that.
longer on YouTube, censoring 1984 in it.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what I mean. I think that I mean, you know, and you were like, oh, inexplicably, it could be like traced back to this. Like, what if I like fucking give you the Holy Bible, dude, and I'm like, oh, you can't publish this anymore because I can inexplicably link. Or you gave the example of like a
Handing
Muslim.
me a single book is different than you standing there and being like, hey,
Why?
this
It
is
just
a
happened
lie that
fucking
I'm going to
10,000 years
propagate,
ago or
and
whatever the fuck.
and you should be very afraid and scared and blah blah blah, like all this. Like, just handing someone a single piece of literature is different than someone using their own like media platform.
Isn't that what happens in church
right?
every day, Lance?
Oh, as in like, should we now ban all
That's what I'm
religion?
saying. I'm saying if you're saying that this single fucking piece of content can be linked back to violence, I'm saying we got to get rid of fucking religious text then, because there, I swear to God, you cannot find a religion in the United States, at least, where it has not been used to, I mean, maybe like Buddhism, but I bet you there's some fucked up people that have tried to, like, there are really peaceful religions out there. Christianity is not the one that you would want to start with, of course, and I'm not a Christian, but that's like fucking more my background, so I would use that one as my prime example, right? Going back to the Crusades, but every example of like the fucking Ku Klux Klan, they were citing passages from the fucking Bible. I mean, every single hateful bigot that exists in this country, domestic terrorism out the fucking asshole, right? Like, there are so many examples. And then you go on to just thinking of like lynchings all throughout the 60s that were done and before then that were done in the name of the Bible. So just use this as a prime example. Then you say, well, this is just a text. It's not like it's being amplified by other people. That's what sermons are. They are literally amplifying the messages of the Bible. And so I think if you're going to argue that, you know, oh, this piece of text or this segment or this whatever was used to inspire a revolt or whatever, then you have so many examples of people saying explicitly, I was inspired by the Bible to commit this violent act. My preacher fucking and then it's like, well, how are we going to crack down and regulate how preachers conduct themselves inside their churches? Is that the next move? Of course, all kinds of odious behavior is occurring inside of those churches. They're advocating for things like, not allowing trans people their medicine, withholding gay people from their access to HIV and AIDS medication and treatment, all these kinds of things. And they'll do it in the name of the Holy Bible. And these things we'll know are criminal. And you could make the same case for, obviously, for Islam or whatever other fucking religion you want to, I would imagine. But we're not going to be out here advocating the banning of these like sacred texts, because by and large, most of the people that consume them don't go off and do those fucked up things with them.
Yeah, but I think we're getting really off topic here, because ultimately it's different to have a single piece of literature and then to have someone who's like, that's why Sam pointed out, it's one thing for you to say a blank statement that you know is factually incorrect, and then it's actionable if you add, and here's the science and the stuff backing it up, and here's why what I'm saying is absolutely 100% true. You should drink bleach to increase the size of your penis.
That literally happens in churches all the time. They'll call it holy water. They'll say it'll cure any of your ailments. They'll say that it will take you to heaven and that all of your problems will be.
But a private religious institution is different than a corporation.
Private company? How come?
Again,
I don't think it should be at
we're
all.
talking about big tech. We're talking about massive corporations with,
massive
again,
churches.
AI
Do you know how big the Christian religion is, Lance?
I've heard of it. Yes, it's.
You want to talk about the scale and reach of fucking Joe Rogan? Let's talk about the real reach of Joel Osteen. Let's talk about the reach of all these other motherfuckers that definitely have been responsible.
Are they reaching
for
11 million people every other day? Is it like? I mean, I know they're huge. I didn't know they're that huge.
Oh, dude, they are massive, and who they're getting at is the most vulnerable people, and they're selling them all kinds of snake oil, and it's a huge problem. It's actually, I'm sure you know Kyle Kalinske, but back in the day, he used to do his entire talk. That's why it's still YouTube handle Secular Talk, because his whole premise of his show was actually systematically debunking the dude from the 700 Club. What's his fucking face? I think he died recently, but Pat Roberts, yeah, all kinds of people, you know, and so what I think that, you know, this might actually be the easiest place for us to find some common ground, in the same way that I am not advocating to censor any of those religious institutions, even though I find them deeply problematic in almost every instance. And surely you can link them back to numerous episodes of violence, bad behavior, corruption, financial misuse, power abuse, sexual assault, which we haven't even talked about within the Catholic Church as being something that is, you know, a huge problem, and then also justified with that very religious text. So I just think that if you're going to say, hey, here's this one example of a guy, you know, saying this, we have to remove it, then we also are going to have to start talking about regulating our churches, because all of those problems that exist via a podcast in the parasocial relationship, in the direct social relationship of a church.
Yeah, and I would contend with, if the church is broadcasting on YouTube and they are directly sending a message that, like, hey, by the way, gay people are coming to eat your babies, you have to kill them first or they will kill you, and it's directly resulting in violence, then yes, absolutely, that needs to be, like, if they're doxing people, if they're telling people here's where you can find the
we
trans
agree
people.
though that should be deplatformable, Lance. You keep using these straw man examples when no one's arguing against that.
Because the point is that we all have different standards. You might say it's total, like I disagree with someone's ability.
My standard is the First Amendment.
Saying the N-word all the time. That like I still think they should have the right to say it. It's abhorrent. I disagree with it, and I know you do. But like this white people should have the ability to call black people the N-word on YouTube. Like that's a different standard than say someone else who's like, well, I don't think they should because there's a whole bunch of reasons that I could go down the list, right? But everyone will set that standard somewhere. Whether it's an illegal action.
Okay, but where's your standard then, Lance? Where's your standard? That's what we're debating. Where is your standard? That's what we're debating.
Well, no, we're debating free speech, tech, and censorship. My standards are going to be probably far higher and unrealistic, on broadly speaking, for general society.
Well,
than
I think
we have to come to a consensus on what is going to be the healthiest standard for society writ large. That's what we do. We live in a society, TM, so we have to be able to find opinions and all of that to be able to find what is going to be the healthiest outcome.
I agree with that. Obviously, my standard is that of the First Amendment. If I had it my way, I think that these tech companies should have to abide by the general parameters set by the First Amendment as it has been legally recognized. And again, as we talked about, it was ruled.
How that works, though? Because that is directly related to the government passing laws. How does the government passing laws that don't infringe upon the right of the freedom of the press, religion, or public demonstration?
Well, no, you said everyone has a line. I'm saying that's my line. I'm not saying that it should be implemented via government legislation. I mean, yes, would I be okay with these social media companies in some way being nationalized so they would have to be regulated? Yes, I would be okay with that. I'm not saying that's a realistic possibility, though. Don't get me wrong. Again, you're talking about where everyone's line is. I'm saying my line is the First Amendment. I think that generally we should uphold a freedom of speech, even if it does result in problematic and dangerous things happening, which newsflash has been happening for all of fucking human history, including before the internet, when cable media and news companies sowed manufactured consent for illegal wars, which killed hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions. I think that, that's where the line should be drawn. I'm asking you, where do you think it should be drawn? Because as it seems right now, you just think it should be drawn based on whatever the in vogue, popular online position. Oh, fuck this guy, he's problematic, therefore let's deplatform him and then cheer it on.
Oh, that's a straw man. I couldn't be further from that. I think that broadly speaking, we need to find out and determine as a consensus, and there are different versions of this and different people who try to analyze this, what is going to be the most problematic and damaging to society, amplified extremism. So when it comes to white supremacy, when it comes to white supremacists, when it comes to neo-Nazis, all that kind of stuff, what exactly is being propagated on these massive social media platforms that is resulting in people either being indoctrinated or becoming endangered? And there is a responsibility. That's the reason all these companies have TOSs, right? They don't abide by them. They're not transparent. They do not enforce them equally. They don't. I've had 2 of my channels deleted, but that's the reason they, at least from a perspective of they want investors to put money into their company, that's the reason they have these things where it's like, we will protect people against gender discrimination, against racial discrimination, against all this kind of stuff, cyber stalking. Like, that's the reason they lay these things out, broadly speaking. They already have templates for how they want to conduct themselves. They just don't apply it. And the bigger you are, the more protected you are on these massive corporations.
So what's the line you would draw, though? Where do you think people should be deplatformed?
I think there are very clear examples. I think Alex Jones should not be allowed to propagate himself. I think Nick Fuentes should not be allowed to propagate himself. White supremacists, Holocaust deniers. I think Andrew Tate certainly has gone well and above the line in that case. People who are directly impacting marginalized communities and committing harm against them, absolutely.
So basically, the entire right wing should just be like not allowed to participate in the online I'm serious, bro, because you could people say these arguments about Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, Jordan Peterson.
I was listing very hyper-specific examples. Come on. Nick Fuentes, Holocaust denier, white supremacist.
Right, but I think the point here, Lance, and if I could jump back in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I want to understand you, man. I'm not trying to, we both want to get to where your position is. I think the problem is that it would be easier for us to understand your line if instead of maybe providing examples of YouTubers who you would ban, but talk about the specific acts. Because I think that if we're going to legislatively or if we're going to, monitor this in any kind of meaningful way, it would be beneficial, because I think that the danger that you're running into, even though I can tell that this is not what you're attempting to do, is that it does kind of come across like, okay, here are all of these right wingers that it's really, like Gavin said, kind of in vogue to hate. And obviously you hate them for all the right reasons and the reasons that Gavin and I hate them, and they're disgusting fucking human beings. Yeah. But, I think if you're arguing that, Andrew Tate is a misogynist and a fucking garbage human being, and that's why he should be removed from YouTube or Twitter, then it's not a stretch to say that fucking Jordan Peterson is a piece of shit and a misogynist and should be removed from Twitter. And then, you're right that that it does just become, at least from the perspective of the layman, that the left is constantly on a crusade to just eliminate debate and discourse from the conversation. This is something that I think we talked to Sam a little bit about, and people who aren't necessarily going to be immediately like jumping to our cause, but would get down with some Bernie Sanders style fucking priorities, and even would be allies in a lot of these situations that we're talking about, right? I feel like the right wing does such a good job of branding the left as, just crybabies that are going to melt down whenever anybody disagrees with them, and then we want them removed. Like, I disagree that that's the case, but I think that the right wing successfully kind of portrays us as that to a lot of their audience. So if you could, instead of talking about like, okay, yes, we know these guys are terrible, could you talk about how Alex Jones, I think, is a unique case because he's actually been criminally convicted, so maybe we could set him aside. Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate haven't been criminally found guilty at this point of any charges. So what would you say is the through line there? Removing Alex Jones because he's currently undergoing another defamation suit after he just was found guilty of another one. So I think that there's a more clear case for that. But for other right wingers, like, where is the line, and when does it become, in your view, the public necessity to like remove them from the discourse?
So just I want to be clear. Alex Jones was found liable in civil court. That wasn't a criminal charge. But to the other point, for the optics, I guess, or the messaging, because you're like, obviously people are looking at the left as a bunch of censorship crybabies who are just like, oh, I don't like these ideas, censorship. One quick little anecdote there. I have been blocked on Twitter by nearly every fucking right winger pro free speech. I don't care about censorship, blah, blah. They all block me. So I don't know what that says.
Yeah,
but
well,
anyway,
I would just provide more robust pushback. I'm talking about regular laymen, not content producers.
Sure.
Or Twitter heads.
Yeah. Okay. So normies on the internet. My personal view is that the left should be focusing on free speech, as in we are trying to expand free speech. We are trying to embolden freedom. I'm a huge fan of freedom, all right? I want to expand freedom. I want freedom in the place you spend 8 hours a day every single day. I want you to have more democracy in the workplace. I don't think a fucking dictatorship of a boss and structure should be able to tell you whatever you do and control your life. Fuck that noise. I want to expand it. Do you like democracy? Don't you want democracy in the workplace? Hey, here's another thing. Look at the GOP. They're crying about cancel culture, 1984 bullshit all the time. Look at all the books they're censoring right now. It's up 230% in school systems that are controlled by Republicans. They are trying to fucking cancel culture books all over the place because they're scared of ideas. They're a bunch of fucking snowflakes who don't want these books in your schools. Fuck that noise. I don't want to see the banning of books. I don't want to see the burning of books. That's the angle, the way you should be going about it.
But Lance, why
Jones gets taken off, I'm not going to be like, oh God, no, I have to come to his defense at this moment. Leave that alone. Let him get deplatformed because it's a net benefit to society in a lot of ways. And on the other hand, I'm going to focus on this side.
Yeah, well, can you agree that both the left and the right could potentially be anti-free speech? Is that a possibility?
Oh, yeah, they are.
Okay, well, okay, thank you. Because every time someone like me or Zach points out that the left is oftentimes very censorious, and as represented by many of the high-profile mainstream members of the left or the liberal left, they absolutely come off as petty authoritarians that do want to censor and deplatform their ideological opponents rather than engaging with them. I think that can be true while also saying undeniably that the right wing is just as bad, if not worse. Guess what? I'm not a member of the fucking right wing. So yeah, I'll point that out, but we got to take care of shit on our side. And if I think this is a major problem affecting the left optically, then yeah, I think it's worth talking about. And we can't just reduce it. Well, yep, the right does it too. Agreed. The left and the right are also both anti-war. Does that mean I can't call out fucking, Democrat politicians when they vote to go to war or, propose pro-war policies? Of course I can call out people on the left when they do that. I think it's just as reprehensible regardless of whoever's advocating for it. So yeah, obviously the right wing is just as bad, if not worse. We're talking about the left. And I do think it's true that a lot of normal people, and by the way, myself included, I think the left is authoritarian and pro-censorship, at least as is represented in the mainstream circles. obviously, in my opinion, true pure leftists don't advocate for censorship, but a lot of people, like yourself, Lance, that I do consider to be on the left, I do think advocate and cheerlead censorship basically whenever it happens, without giving the necessary caveats about the precedents this is set or the principle that you're betraying. Again, obviously, I understand that on a case-by-case basis, I'm not going to shed a tear when someone like Andrew Tate is censored, when someone like Alex Jones is censored. I'm personally not upset about it. I don't give a fuck about these people. I hope they're income craters and that they are reduced to complete irrelevancy. Yes, obviously, I personally view that. But as a commentator and as someone that is a representative of the left, even in a small way, no, I'm not going to come out here and fucking cheerlead that because of the principle that I support and the precedent that it sets.
I think it's more important to cheerlead, obviously, more worker power. And I think what's really important
that has nothing to do with this.
Yeah, well, what we haven't brought up once when it comes to free speech and discussing it is that freedom of speech for one person can limit the freedom of speech of another person. If you happen to be in a workplace, you go in there and there's a whole bunch of black people who work in that or other people who are part of marginalized communities, you go in there and every day you're extremely racist to them, you call them the N-word, whatever, that's going to make them feel unsafe. They might not want to come into the workplace. They might not be able to work there. So there's a big difference between saying free speech absolutism, because that usually applies to people who already have power in society, people who have power under the structures of white supremacy or under the structures of patriarchy. That's who's going to benefit the most. So there has to be something to distinguish between freedom of speech and freedom of consequence. Like if you say something out loud,
literally the law, Lance. You can't go to somebody at your office and call them the N-word. That would be harassment, and you would literally end up in court for that.
Yeah, well, or I hope at the very least fired. And so
you would literally I'm telling you that is a legally punishable crime. That would be harassment and potentially intimidation. You would have certainly a case to get them what's that, where you can't be 100 feet from somebody, what's that called, restraining order. Like you would have legal recourse for that, and I would and Gavin, I know, would 100% support that, because of course you're going to make that person physically or you feel unsafe if you're intimidating them and slandering them and doing all those kinds of things. That's why we do have laws that protect people.
That would apply if you were able to afford a lawyer, a legal team. Like that doesn't, broadly speaking.
Well, that's a different issue, though.
Able to do that.
Well, I mean, people in my YouTube chat, and on Twitter and all kinds of stuff say horrible, terrible things to me all the time. Like I'm not equating that experience to those of a marginalized, person living in America, which is very clearly a country founded on white supremacy and has this history. But, a lot of people think that I'm a gay dude or like a trans person or whatever, even though I'm a straight cis male. And I get all kinds of hateful, disgusting messages calling me all kinds of slurs all the time. And, unfortunately, I do have to fucking deal with it. Like I do that. I can't sue all these people. I can't deplatform them all. Like that is just a reality of living on the internet, being a part of the internet conversation ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. It's unfortunate, but you could say that about reality too. I mean, yeah, we live in a racist society. We live in a bigoted society. Like, and
well, let's be better. It's kind of the point. Let's try and improve ourselves. Let's
well, again, under the First Amendment, Nazis were allowed to march in Skokie. And again, do I have to like that? No, but that is the precedent that's been set.
Yeah, but why do you keep relating it to the First Amendment? The First Amendment, again, is about the government passing laws against the freedom of the
because I think that social media companies, because I think that social media companies and the internet as a whole is basically the new public square. And just like how I support people's right to have extremist and bigoted viewpoints in public, again, I don't agree with those people in any way, shape, or form. But do I think that they should be somehow, taken off the streets if you're organizing a far right rally or something? Like, and the same thing I think should apply to social media, unless again you're directly violating laws. If you're arguing for threats of violence, or if you're committing or threatening acts of violence on people, that's different. But as far as just presenting,
you're against doxing.
What was that?
And then doxing too. Right?
Yes, I would consider doxing to be one of those things that crosses the line of free speech, despite it being an illegal gray area. Yes, I personally would consider that to be stepping over the line. I don't think that doxing should be permissible.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we're going in circles. I think we've established we all have a standard, and ours are just a bit different. Yeah. And
no doubt about it.
If I was to summarize the things we agree on, I don't think it's a solution. I don't think it's a band-aid. I don't think the solution to the Andrew Tates and the Alex Jones is simply to censor them and that solves these problems, because it doesn't address the underlying issues of why people are interested in the Andrew Tates and the Alex Jones and why people want to seek that out.
And
why I said that it has to be met in in multitude of ways.
Well, I would totally agree with that, Lance. And I think we're wrapping this conversation up on a good note. My only other response to that would be that I think that censoring those people does, for a lot of people on the left, provide the illusion that the underlying issue has been taken care of. Because again, all these people celebrate when someone like Alex Jones or Andrew Tate gets deplatformed, but you're really just cutting the head off of the hydra. Another one's going to regrow. Another person is going to take advantage of the same algorithmic system that led to the success of Andrew Tate or Alex Jones and fulfill the exact same role until you behead that one too. It's just like playing fucking what's the game, the whack-a-mole, it's just like trying to get everyone. So I agree that there is underlying issues that do need to be addressed. Censorship is just a fake solution. It doesn't solve anything. It only further radicalizes these people and their audience while providing an illusion to people oftentimes in the mainstream liberal left that everything's fine now, out of sight, out of mind. And I think that is a band-aid. That is all it is. And I just think it's a poor solution to a problem we agree exists.
I mean, I
don't think, but in that moment, I think it probably provides a little bit of reprieve for like the Sandy Hook parents, right? Like, one less day they have to have someone on YouTube posting videos.
Well, that's an emotional argument. You're trying to appeal to my emotions and the audience.
I'm trying to say that's the moment in which why that like people would celebrate, why people would be like, well, it's good that he doesn't have a megaphone, or at least as big a megaphone in this. So that's why. That's the reason why.
There are individual instances where personally I'm not going to shed a tear, and privately I might say, hell yeah, I'm glad that fucker's off the internet. This kind of reminds me of the discussion. I don't know if you watched the debate we had with Vosh recently. We're talking about drone strikes, and I was arguing that there is basically no permissible situation in which a drone strike should be allowed. I don't think the U.S. has the right to be committing extrajudicial assassinations around the world via our drone program. And Vosh was saying, well, what about this one specific instance that we were debating, the killing of this Al-Qaeda dude who was like, the second in command behind 9/11. He's like, well, you have to agree in this instance, this one's acceptable, right? And I said, okay, maybe personally I can agree. Fuck that guy. I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he's fucking dead. He's a piece of shit. He's a mass murderer, etc. But am I going to celebrate that drone strike? No, because it justifies a system of warfare that is illegal, that is offensive, and that there's no real accountability for. So in the same way, on a case-by-case basis, fuck Andrew Tate, fuck Alex Jones. But am I going to come out here and cheerlead a system of censorship which will absolutely be turned against me and which 90% of the time isn't justifiable? No, that's my stance.
And was it about woke strikes? Was that it, or like I don't even know what that debate was about, but
sorry for going off. If you haven't seen that debate, you probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Either way, I just think it's a matter of defending things based on principle versus obviously you're always going to be able to find specific incidents which kind of undermine the larger principle that I think we should support. But overall, I think it's better to abide by your principled support of a principle, in this case, the First Amendment, rather than cherry picking. Oh, well, here, I do support censorship, and in this instance, deplatforming should be celebrated. No, in my opinion, it should never be celebrated, and that we should generally uphold the principles of free speech and the First Amendment. I think it's important for a healthy democracy and discourse and all that stuff. But that being said, we definitely understand where you're coming from too, Lance. I think this was a great conversation. Definitely gave me a lot to think about.
I think this is the spiciest one we've ever had. This is the third one now.
Yeah, no, this is good. I like this because I feel like this is good because it's important for people to, we need to be leftists that can have discourse with one another. We need to be able to push back. Like, I know that at the end of the day, I agree with Lance on probably 90+% of issues on the left. So I feel like it's important for people to, in good faith, have these discussions. I would much rather debate Lance on this than some fucker that's like, an anarcho-capitalist or something else that I like have literally no common ground of ethics with. I feel like it's important.
You're not a fan of anarcho-capitalists?
Bro, we actually, one of our earliest debates ever, one of the first times we ever debated anybody was with the anarcho-capitalist crowd, and
that's funny.
It's a fun time for fireworks and whatever. But yeah, it's always good to have you on, Lance. Always good to hear your pushback. I guess you're also just live streaming on your own show right now. So I was gonna say if you want to plug anything to the Vanguard, but you're.
Sure. If any of you weren't too annoyed with the last hour and 40 minutes, what the fuck, of convo with Gavin and Zach, go to the Serfs.tv and you'll find all my links there. And go nuts, boys. I'm also streaming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for stopping by, Lance. Obviously, if anyone in your audience wasn't too annoyed by us, we're the Vanguard. You guys probably know, just type in the Vanguard to YouTube and you can find more of our amazing, perfect logical arguments and takes that are inarguable with. No, I'm just kidding. This was a great conversation, Lance. I really enjoy fleshing out the specifics and getting into the weeds about this, because it really, especially in the internet age, obviously communication is so much different now than it was when our parents grew up, for example. And we do need to grapple with the kind of parameters that are set and how these different kind of values and principles should be enforced on an internet platform. So great discussion. Thanks so much for sharing it with us, Lance. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, totally. And sorry, I was trying to open my window back up and then noticed I put you upside down. That wasn't a power move at the
No, it's okay. We also had our own DIY mishap also. I was like, yeah, fuck you guys, you're upside down now. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, take care. Take care,
talk to you soon.
Yeah, peace out, bro. Yeah, I thought that was an awesome conversation. It did get heated, but I feel like it was totally in good faith, and no one's feelings were hurt or anything like that. But yeah, great discussion.
Yeah, Lance is from Twitch, so unless anybody's like fucking taking their shirt off and like insulting somebody's like family lineage, I think it's considered like a relatively PC debate. But yeah, I like the fact that with a guy like Lance, you can turn up the heat and then turn it back down and have a good chat. He's a good guy, and I like him. So yeah, 100% disagreed on that a little bit. I know we got some super chats throughout the live stream. I don't know if we want to react to any of those. Let's take censorship to its logical conclusion. Ban all literature since something has influenced someone somewhere to do something horrible. That was what I was trying to make the point of with religious text. It's like, well, if you're going to say like, oh, this inspiration is like clearly linked to violence, I'm like, bro, you want to talk about clearly linking something to violence? Let's start with the Bible. Okay, we'll go all the way back to the Crusades and move forward.
Yeah, and not just the Bible, but like you said, pretty much any religious text. I mean, I remember when like the anti-SJW, I guess it still is huge on YouTube, but I remember when like the skeptic community on YouTube seemingly overnight became like the anti-SJW community, and all of a sudden, all these people were talking about how books like the Quran, for example, directly lead to terrorism under the name of Islam and all that stuff, and how we should adjust accordingly as a society and all that stuff. And I was always like, well, yeah, of course there's going to be harm done by the Quran, just like by the Bible. You can't censor those ideas. You can't censor those texts. So in the same way, yeah, I think it applies to the internet too. And also I thought it was a great example you gave, Zach, about the Anarchist Cookbook. Like, yeah, that's a book that definitely has undeniably resulted in dangerous harm, violence, whatever. In the same way, I don't think it should be censored. I mean, hell, you can even buy a copy of Mein Kampf at the fucking Amazon.com. That book has obviously led to some of the most cataclysmic and just insane levels of human suffering of all time. I still think you should be able to access it and read it as a matter of historical record.
Oh yeah, and I mean, look, go back to the philosophers of the like quote unquote Enlightenment, right? Like those guys' texts were used to fucking establish brand new fucking countries, and a lot of them were used in unsavory ways. Like, you go back and you read like John Locke, and it's like, people are fucking bad, and at least I'm pretty sure that's Locke, and therefore you need a fucking government to like make them in order. And then you got Rousseau, who's kind of like, oh, blah, people just are so like stuck in the system and all these kind of stuff, and then you use that to enhance violence. Does that mean I don't think the philosophers of like the fucking 17th or 18th century should be able to be like rented out and checked out and looked at? Like, should I not be able to read Machiavelli because a bunch of fucking global readers used it as inspiration to like massacre somebody and then fucking take power away from them? Like, no. You can rent the prints at basically any library, and you can also read it for free on Google, right? So yeah, I tend to be very, very much in that state of mind. I try and use it. I try and use literature, text, print, stuff that's already been legally like fucking argued for so long. That's kind of like the bedrock for how I view the internet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hysteric Raider. We really appreciate that. And thank you, Bookworm Skates. Fascists know they can't call for direct violence. That's why they all just say someone needs to do something until the violence manifests itself. Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that. But again, if you get that far into the minutia and you're like, we have to police insinuations, I just think that becomes too much of a slippery slope, because again, like a position that Zach and I have and a lot of other people on the left that is currently considered very much so radical, very much so outside of the mainstream, and even by a lot of people problematic, is our position on Israel and U.S. funding towards Israel. Well, a lot of people from like AIPAC, for example, would say that what Ilhan Omar said about AIPAC is implying that we need it's implicating or it's implying anti-Semitic beliefs. I disagree with that. I think that she wasn't implying anything anti-Semitic, but again, depending on who you ask, she might be. So it's all very kind of up for debate. And I think when you just let a certain class of tech oligarchs or people in the government or in the establishment at large, and you let them decide where the line is drawn. I don't think that's a good idea because, again, that's always going to be weaponized against people that are dissenting. And even though some of the people that will be affected, you'll be glad they're gone. I think, unfortunately, a lot of other people are going to get swept up in that too, that aren't actually fascists and that aren't actually espousing anything that's bigoted.
Yeah, look, I mean, the same thing would be turned around and said, because I like to use eco-terrorists as a fucking good prime example because they don't get a lot of media attention at all. And these are charges that will like wreck your entire fucking life. I'm talking like decade charges, like seriously horrifying charges. Like you have to take a plea deal and then admit to something that's going to really make your life hard. And that's if you don't want to rot in a fucking jail cell forever because they will bring the fucking hammer down on you for eco-terrorism. And of course, that's righteous destruction, in my opinion, right? These things are literally machines that are destroying the earth, right? Like if you go and destroy a fracking plant or whatever, like you are participating in an act of destruction, right? But hey man, those people are polluting our environment. That's also an act of destruction, right? Climate people all the time on the left say, hey, we need to start putting our bodies on the line. We need to start doing civil disobedience. We need to start, making it, felt by the oligarchical elite. So is every time that Chris Hedges says we need to put our bodies on the line, is that something that he needs to be banned for? Because it would come to a guy like Chris Hedges first. It would come to a guy like Cornel West first when he said, X, Y, and Z. If they are calling for direct action, right? Which Noam Chomsky always did, which is, I forgot to bring this up, but this is a fundamental component of his, free speech absolutum and his free, his relentless support of public, freedom of articulation and your own voice and stuff, because that will start to again bite the left in the ass. Those eco-terrorists, they're already classified as terrorists. What if we say somebody needs to do something as about the environment? Are we enabling and dog whistling those eco-terrorists, and then we have to be brought down? Even though, of course, when we use eco-terrorists, we're often talking about environmental activists, right? But this is how the law will portray them to you, and this is how it will be weaponized against us. So it's not some foo-foo esoteric thing like this is never going to happen. Like, no, the on the ground, like serious fucking activists that are doing this, they're risking their lives, and they're going to be labeled terrorists. And if you support them, then you will be charged with supporting terrorists and then taken off the internet. See how those things become slippery slopes. That's what we're articulating.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. But thank you, Bookworm Skates. Really appreciate your perspective. Also, thank you, Hysteric Raider. Big trust deficit if people don't believe doctors. I mean, yeah, that's definitely true. Like I said, there's an underlying issue that should be addressed here. It's just, I don't think censorship is the best solution to said problem. And, the whole, like, people taking bullshit medical advice from people that aren't medical professionals, that's nothing new. Like I said to Sam in our debate with him, you think that anti-vaxxer sentiment started with COVID? My entire life, there's been crazy people on Facebook that are spreading anti-vax talking points about other vaccines completely, before COVID was even a thing. People were trafficking in anti-vax talking points and other kind of modern medicine style talking points. There's whole religions that say you shouldn't take modern medicine. You should only, you should let God heal you or whatever. These are viewpoints that have existed for a long time now. It's not like it started 2 years ago.
Yeah, and here's my point. There are like 10 million reasons why I support nationalizing all healthcare services and giving everybody access to safe, reliable medical care. Because we've talked about, you have to address the underlying problem here. Yeah, nobody in America goes to the doctor. I consider myself to be very well off. I'm not rich. Gavin and I pay our rent though, and we're just two dudes. I don't have like fucking children or anything. You know what I'm saying? So like I get by. But I don't go to the doctor regularly. Gavin, when's the last time you went to the fucking doctor? I went to the hospital because I fucked up my elbow on one of those stupid scooters.
I think I was like 17. So like probably like that's over 5 years ago, 8 years ago that I've been to the doctor.
Yeah. So people who are even in not even like desperate financial predicaments, like Gavin and I, if we really needed to go to the doctor, we'd figure it out. Like I think I am, you know what I'm saying? Like we'd make it happen. We'd be fine. But you don't establish a recurring relationship with your doctor. And that's the whole point, right? Like, watch Little House on the Prairie, right? It was one fucker that was your doctor, and he was your doctor from the time you were born. He delivered you, and then until he died, and like his nephew or his son or whatever would become the fucking doctor. Maybe they'd bring in a new doctor, and that guy would deliver babies, and he would because you have to have a relationship with your medical professional. Otherwise, it's uncomfortable. You don't have trust there. You can't be honest with them. There's so many weird private things that you have to talk about with the doctor, and being open and honest about them is how you catch illnesses early, right? Like people who regularly go to the doctor and get checkups, those are the people who live from cancer, because they'll be like, we caught this early. So those people develop trust in their doctors. If you can't afford to go to the doctor and you haven't, Gavin and I haven't been in 7-8 years. If we're 50, who knows how many decades since you've been to a doctor. Of course, you're not going to listen to the fucking echo chamber or whatever. You're not going to go to the doctor. You're going to listen to the guy that you listen to every day and have a deep parasocial relationship with. I think that's eliminated to a very high degree if you have a real medical presence in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Thank you, though, Hysteric Raider. We really appreciate that. Thank you also, Nick Coletti, for the $2. Let's end the manosphere monopoly. I mean, I definitely think that there should be more like leftist pushback on those issues. And as you said, Nick, like more content about dating and relationships as it pertains to capitalism. We absolutely should be present in those spaces. Now, is it what, Zach and I are most passionate about talking to or devoting our live streams to? Maybe not. I don't really find myself all that interested in gravitating towards those specific topics, but should other people do that? Absolutely. I support that 100%.
Yeah, I'd be interested in having a guest on to chat about that. I think it's really, I do think it's interesting. There was that book that was making a lot of waves a while ago, Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism, all those kinds of things. I think it's interesting topic to explore it, but obviously Gavin's right. It's not like thematically like related to our show. It's more just like, a byproduct of the society that we live in and, recognize the reality of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it for super chats, though. So thank you guys all for tuning in so much. We really appreciate it. Make sure to hit that like button if you haven't already. And we do like to end our shows with a huge shout out to our Patreon community. So if you guys enjoy our content, if you enjoy our perspective and what we bring to this space, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. We really would appreciate it. It really does help us keep the show afloat and keep us 100% viewer funded, 100% independent, et cetera, which is why we like to start and end all of our live streams with a big shout out to the patrons, because they literally make this show possible. They make this content possible. And we are, eternally grateful to their contributions and support. So thank you guys so much. And again, the link is in the description. If you're interested in supporting our show, that's where you can do so. There's also a PayPal link if you're feeling generous. But either way, we really appreciate the support, guys. Make sure to hit that like button. It's totally free. And with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the debate. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Peace out, everybody.